Hello, and welcome to Simplifying Data Tracking with InterBase. This webinar will look at InterBase Change Views for cross-platform development. My name is Mary Kelly, and I am a software consultant here at Embarcadero Technologies. You can reach out to me at mary.kelly@embarcadero.com with any questions or comments about InterBase or RAD Studio. To get us started today, let's take a look at our agenda. I will quickly outline what InterBase is before moving to cover the basics of ChangeViews, what this awesome feature is, how it works, some of the benefits of using ChangeViews, and how it differs from traditional data change tracking methods, before showing you how to set up your applications for ChangeViews. I also have a few resources available that I've included as well before ending with our Q&A. Traditional ways of tracking changes typically follows either triggers or date-time field stamps. You place a trigger on a table and the changes to that table get logged to a database table that states that the changes have occurred. That log table is there for every single subscriber who needs data tracking. Then when you connect to the database, you have to work your way through that change log, which can be extremely difficult to query or just take too long to query something specific on a certain table. They still have their purpose, of course, being used for database integrity or audit logging, but aren't really a great tool for mobile development and management. Date and time field stamps, they also create enormous records for your database tables as they add extra fields or columns for time or date stamps to track those many changes. If you're tracking changes at the record level, then each field has the additional date field, which increases your disk usage, making it more difficult to maintain and understand the data that you have. Beyond that, you have to have planned them out from the beginning. It can be very difficult to add them later or after the fact, as you have to make sure that all the queries work, especially when tied to a customer-facing application. Plus, those extra fields can carry wrong or even redundant data, and that can make managing your database a bit of a pain. With many of our applications, we need to be able to store data with the option of viewing it and working offline, maintaining a safe and secure environment for that data, and further keeping that data up to date in sync with our servers. This presents a challenge for mobilization when dealing with scalability, performance, and security protocols for mobile devices. This is where InterBase comes in. InterBase is a highly scalable, powerful, embeddable, and encryptable database that works across several different platforms, including iOS and Android, something only a few databases out there can do whilst running natively on these platforms. It's extremely lightweight and has a tiny footprint, so you can imagine how quick and fast it is by not bogging down the system it's running on. It has near zero administration, so you can deploy it and not really need a DBA to maintain it. InterBase works as a server database, desktop, or as an embedded database that sits inside your application so you can use it for any of those applications. We have a couple of different editions of InterBase. They include the InterBase Server, Desktop, To Go, and IB Lite versions. We also have a developer edition of InterBase that's included with your RAD Studio license. If you have multiple users and devices that need to connect to the same data, then InterBase Server is the best choice for your architecture. The server runs on both Windows and Linux, giving you the flexibility of connecting multiple different types of devices to the same database. InterBase also easily scales up to hundreds or even thousands of concurrent connections, and since it runs as well on a laptop as it does on a commercial grade server, it provides a very flexible solution to accommodate your customers' demands as well as all their resources. The desktop edition has the same idea as InterBase Server, except that it's only permitted to local database connections. So as your customer base grows, you can easily scale from a desktop license to a server solution. InterBase to Go is the option for anyone wanting to add data storage to their applications, either locally or by connecting to a remote InterBase server somewhere. With InterBase to Go, you can have standalone encrypted data storage and remove the need to install client drivers. IB Lite is similar to Go, as both contain the same libraries for the embeddable database engine, but has a few restrictions such as a database file size limit, no encryption capabilities, and also no change views. IB also allows you to be able to query the database to find out what's changed and get the data to or from your devices with this great feature called ChangeViews. Database applications that target mobile platforms require support between remote and mobile users, and it's considered critical that companies ensure access to the same information as quickly as possible. Being able to track your changes when you're scaling the number of users in your database tends to be a bit difficult with mobile incentives. When you embed InterBase into your mobile application, you not only get to take advantage of the quick access to data that you would otherwise need to download every time you requested it, but you also have the ability to sync only your changes with a remote server and get data back that you specifically need accurate accounts of. Now, with ChangeViews, you have this new method to work with that makes it a lot easier to develop and scale for your customer base. There isn't that extra overhead on existing transactions since you're keeping a consistent view of any changed data that is observed by other transactions. ChangeViews are a subscription-based model used to subscribe to some data and identify what data has changed in the database. So you create a subscription that covers different tables and columns and allow or give users the rights to subscribe to changes in that data. From the security perspective, there's no log tables or anything, so it's a very clean setup that tracks internally, so you don't have to worry about external files that everyone has access to or something that someone could scan to find out information relating to changes or updates of your database. So only the people who subscribe to those data changes can actually see the changes made available to them or for them. Subscriptions can run both during a connection and spanning a connection. So during a connection, you can get an alert and just fetch the deltas. So if you were to fetch a few thousand records and then get a message that says, hey, here are some changes to the table, you can use those changes to get the delta instead of having to refresh the whole query again, reducing the time and data movement over your network. For spanning a connection, a really cool thing is that you don't actually have to be connected for it to record the changes. Once you start a database transaction, you can have a subscription set, then disconnect from your database, and then start a new connection with a new transaction at a future point in time. So for mobile devices, this is huge as we don't always have our smartphones connected to the internet. Now, in today's world, we are pretty much connected, but with our carriers charging us more and more for less data packages, sometimes we don't want to think about downloading a few thousand or even a few million records over our mobile phone plans and thinking, how much is this one going to cost me? And each subscriber can have multiple devices, so you can run a single user connected to the database, and then everyone has this unique identifier for their subscribers, or each subscriber can have an ID for their phones, laptops, and so on. So what's really all that different about ChangeViews and how it tracks data changes? Well, it has a near zero effect on your database speed because there really is no need for log tables, triggers, special database users, or date time field stamps. So ChangeViews is an exceptionally lightweight and fast database that has been built into the InterBase core to work on both the server and the deeply embedded versions of InterBase. You also get field level granularity. You just can create a script and run it to subscribe to your data as you're subscribing to that data and granting specific users access to see it, kind of like a newsfeed for your Twitter account. You don't have to worry about table metadata changes. You can automatically filter your changes as well. And the SQL that you're using is just your typical plain old SQL to perform these operations. You can run some select statements that ask what or how many records have changed, and you have integration with FireDAC and the IBX components. Today we'll be checking out the FireDAC components here in a little while. And it's also highly scalable and minimizes on-disk size. Using a tracking system like ChangeViews provides you with the ability to set a list of changes like inserts, updates, and deletes that we made to the database from one point in time to another. So if you imagine that you have an Android user who connects to the central database and needs to bring their data up to date since the last time they were online. Without ChangeViews tracking, this user would have to fetch all the data from the central server and then merge that data with whatever changes they made with their copy of the database that's sitting on their device. Now, for phones and tablets, this creates a very inefficient environment since you may be moving around a lot and lose connection before the download completes, and then have to start all over again, especially if you're working with very large data sets where it can be resource intensive to a phone or tablet. To help avoid these kinds of issues, ChangeViews, unlike some other traditional databases, doesn't implement external logs and timestamp fields that can easily bloat your databases and impact the performance of your database by slowing down queries. Even worse, with mobile, is the concern for scalability once you reach hundreds or thousands of concurrent users. And with ChangeView tracking subscriptions, you can remove the necessity for time fields, log tables, and triggers. Since you're using SQL to create the subscriptions on your tables and columns, you're really as flexible as your SQL code. So once your subscription is set, you're using the same SQL statements to select the original data and the deltas. And it even goes back to fetch the changes that weren't passed in your subscription before activation. similar to a news feed relating to a particular subject of interest, where you get previous feeds all the way back to the beginning, no matter from where you start. A big problem with a standalone briefcase model is that when you get the chance to sync with your server, you now have to deal with the probability that the data that you just collected may in fact be out of date, since without log tracking in place, it tends to be a hassle to know when the data was last updated on the client side or whether it's out of date. We have this subscription that allows you to subscribe to specific columns or all the columns that can span either a single or multiple tables. So you create the subscription to insert, delete, or update any changes. And once it's created, then you can either have one subscriber or multiple subscribers to the same subscription so that it collects their data based on the requirements to that subscription. People or devices can subscribe to whatever views you have available to them. So, like with mailing lists or Google Alerts, you can choose what content you want to receive alerts for or information on, and say, I want this email as it appears, so hourly or daily or weekly. And just like with Google Alerts, you can have multiple subscriptions that you can subscribe to. So each user can have multiple devices subscribed or can see a certain number of devices and then define those devices with a tracking ID like a GUID or a device identifier. Now, a fascinating feature of ChangeViews that I really like is that when you connect to your central database and you're posting your local changes, the next time you ask for those updates, you won't have the same changes sent back to you in the session. So this is really cool because unlike a transaction, we can actually span across a connection and you can sort of pick up where you left off and then ask what the changes are. And because you don't have additional logs, there's little impact on the database performance when you have a lot of devices connected. Next, I'm going to explain how to get the IB2Go license and add that to an application before showing you the syntax for ChangeView Subscriptions and a quick configuration explanation in RAD Studio. Now, it's pretty simple and straightforward on how to gain access to an InterBase 2017 to go license. You have two methods to which you can download and install the embeddable database, either through the website by clicking on Start a Free Trial, and instead of installing the server, you can click here and get a copy of the InterBase to go trial, typing in your EDN account information, I'm not a robot, and starting your trial, or through the Get It Package Manager up at Tools, Get It Package Manager, where you can then install the IB Lite and IB2Go versions of InterBase. Next, we will go to reg.embarcadero.com, where we can type in our serial key, our registration code, and clicking Next provides us with the text file for our download. So now we've registered our InterBase to go license file, and upon downloading, I'll change the text file to reg_ib2go.txt and place it in my redistributable folder for InterBase 2017. Now that I have my license file, I can go into the options down to environmental variables, and with my IB redist directory, make sure that the value is in the location where I have my InterBase 2017 license file. When using IB2Go, you have to have two files included in your project manager. You need to have the database file, either .ib or .gdb file that you're using, along with the license text file. So I'll go ahead and add my new license text file to my project manager under users, public, documents, Embarcadero, InterBase, redistribution 2017, and I'll grab my internal usage file. All you have to do next is go project, deployment, click the add featured files, expand out InterBase to go, and then choose your options, whether for the IB to go or the IB Lite versions. I'm going to go ahead and show you this sample that I have of a ChangeView subscription on the medicines database. Now, this database is actually included with Rad Studio in the samples that we ship, so you can go ahead and check out some ChangeViews yourself later. You can find it in the DBMS specific InterBase folder under the FireDAC samples. Now, this database has 3 tables, and I have a few columns that house the categories and info for the medicines in the list, along with a link list that connects the dots between which medicines and categories go where. As you can see in the metadata, these are just normal tables that show the definitions behind our tables where we have no triggers in place. To make this a ChangeViews explanation though, we have in the expanded tree panel for medicine.ib a view called Subscriptions. And if I click on that view, then we can see that we already have a subscription created. So we're creating a subscription titled sub_medicines updates and setting that subscription on the categories medicine and medicine categories tables for inserts, deletes, and updates. So if there are any specific fields that I want to track, I can just add some brackets and state which fields I specifically want to manage. So this is really it for the syntax of creating a change view. So it's pretty simple. Of course, there's a lot more that can be done with a change view than just this, such as granting permissions. Now that the subscription has been created, I can grant permissions for the subscriptions to either specific users or a role, and then the said users can start with their subscriptions. So in our pharmacy database, I have the same tables, only I have a few more added in this one, and I'm going to subscribe to the data so I can see what data is changing across the order, customer, and pharmacy tables. So let's see exactly how this works from an application. So I'm going to start off with opening a sample project. You have these samples in your Rad Studio, Delphi, or C++ Builder installation. So let's navigate through to the Delphi example that we're going to use today. So we're going to choose Object Pascal, Database, FireDAC, Samples, DBMS specific, InterBase, and we're going to choose ChangeViews. Now the project we'll be working on today will be the pharmacy POC, so we'll open that up. I've gone ahead and opened 2 separate executables, one in debug mode and the other in release, so I can get things moving faster. I also have the central database admin tool, so I can alter the central data. First off, I'm going to fetch any deltas that may be available now, starting the session. I can see that there is a change available already. This one isn't important right now, so I will just update that. I have my local data in my P1 executable, and using the application, I'm going to go ahead and make a few changes to the central data, changing allergy to allergies, adding a value to a medicine name before fetching the deltas or changes so we can get that data updated and highlighted. Using show merged, that takes my local data into a FireDAC memory table, and using the delta merge option to merge those deltas. Now, ChangeViews has field level granularity, allowing me to see what the changes are bolded and highlighted. Posting that data into Pharmacy 2 here, I'm going to make another change to my data, specifically altering the value 2 to 3 and adding another value to another medication. Now looking at the pharmacy software again, I can just fetch the deltas and we now have the record showing the most recent changes only. I can then post that data into my database, making sure that everything's set up. Now, it's pretty cool to look at, but the underlying code is what really makes ChangeViews awesome. So the way this works is that you have two queries, one for the local data and one for the remote database. They both hold the exact same query, and really the only big difference is that we have this FD transaction delta. Now, under the options for this transaction, I have it currently set to snapshot for my isolation mode, and currently it's set to rollback, but I could either choose commit or none. Since I don't need it to commit, I'll just keep it in rollback. Next, I can activate my subscription. Then, running the same query, I would get back all of my deltas. So if we go ahead and take a look at the underlying code behind our module, so we set the local queries to be all cached updates, since we're going to be applying all of our delta changes. We can then open the local queries before activating our transaction delta for our remote server. Then you would just set the subscription using the subscription name at whatever the device ID that we've chosen active. So now we're only reading the deltas, allowing us to go ahead and read only the deltas from our queries, and then using a merged data set, which actually just applies all of the change elements into our merged data set before posting those deltas in our local database. We can apply our delta merge, then finish off with applying those updates, committing the transaction, and we're done. So that's ChangeViews in a nutshell. You can implement on the server, in your application, embedding a to-go license for mobile device storage. It's very simple to really get yourself up and running with ChangeViews. For resources available, I have included links to both the InterBase and RadStudio.wiki sites. These are the main hub of information for our products, so you'll find code and application samples, components documentation, and a lot more. Two specific links I want to highlight are for ChangeViews and the FireDAC change notifications. Now, both detail additional information around InterBase's ChangeViews, such as how to set up ChangeViews and the capabilities of this feature. Sample applications in general using InterBase along with a pharmacy and general ChangeViews application are actually shipped with Rad Studio in the samples. For download and video links, I have the trial downloads for all the products used in this webinar today. There are also several videos that work with ChangeViews and additional InterBase features on our YouTube channel. Embedded databases provide you with a secure way to keep your data on your devices and provide you with the fastest possible access to your table records. Adding ChangeViews only speeds up your development time without having to modify the underlying structure or your data. Embeddable databases offer the best of both worlds when deploying to mobile devices and can make a huge impact on your application. If you're looking for ways to reduce time associated with keeping your data up to date while still maintaining transparent security, then InterBase is really a cost-effective solution with a lightweight, fast, admin-free database where you can simply embed, deploy, and relax. If you have any questions or comments that we can't cover in the Q&A today, you can reach out to me at mary.kelly@embarcadero.com. Thank you again for attending this webinar. Now let's get to some questions.